The essence of success can be seen in the form of rewards such as status, honor, and wealth, but these are only fitting for those who have spared no effort or hard work. In my eyes, my in-laws and mother-in-law seemed like people who were not worthy of receiving such valuable rewards. I saw their naive idea of getting by without doing anything as nothing more than a naive illusion. I married David when I was 28 years old. David, despite being born into a distinguished family, had a calm disposition, but also at times could be carefree and thick-headed, which was part of his charm. For me, a country girl tired of city life, David warmed the cockles of my heart. The details of his family background, family business, the existence of his brothers, and how he himself was involved in all of that did not matter to me. Several years after George, my father-in-law, announced his retirement, David's attitude changed dramatically, and he suddenly transformed into a workaholic caring only about his job. This was mostly visible through his crazy obsession with money. He was the third son in his family and was not expected to achieve much in life. As a woman who had only graduated from a local high school, I didn't get a feeling like his family could be against our relationship when I was welcomed into their home. On the contrary, their indifferent attitude towards me was rather like a blessing. Even during that one meeting with my in-laws, right before we got married, Linda, my mother-in-law, asked me,
"Which university did you attend?" "Oh, that's right, you only graduated from high school, didn't you?" "Well, that's fine. David is the same. He finally went to a third-rate university after being rejected twice, so there's not much difference between you two. You're both on the same level."
From this comment, it was clear that Linda's interest in me was minimal. In Linda's eyes, Ken, the eldest son who had graduated from one of the most prestigious universities in New York, and had a wife from a popular girls' college chosen through an arranged marriage, shone brightly. Oliver, second oldest, was the same, and his wife was also a talented graduate from the same prestigious college. With the existence of these outstanding elder sons and their families, it did not matter to Linda how immature David, the third son, might be. Ken and his wife, as well as Oliver and his wife, clearly looked down on me and David. David's father, George, liked David's personality, but did not recognize him as an asset to the company he ran, and basically gave him freedom. This situation meant a very stable and peaceful marriage for me. However, this peace began to fade when my father-in-law started considering retirement. Driven by the fear that he might be kicked out of the company, David transformed and began to devote himself to his work. As he gradually achieved results and improved his performance in the sales department, his personality also became more tense and his nerves constantly on edge. And this change was only just beginning. The harsh words from David weighed heavily on my heart.
"Having a woman like you as a wife means I can't expect much help at home. I should have married a more respectable woman like the ones my brothers chose."
His condescending attitude became more and more apparent each day. Since the birth of our child, he started drowning himself in alcohol almost every night, not returning home until midnight. When he did come home,
"I had an important client dinner tonight,"
he would always repeat the same excuse. However, his clothes started to smell strongly of perfume, and I suspected it was from women who he met in bars. But when I started to smell perfume also on his underwear, I knew there was no way he wasn't sleeping with these women. When I confronted him about it,
"It's just innocent fun. That's what makes a man, man."
These were the only answers I got back. He talked about it as if it was something to be proud of. From that time on, I seriously started to consider a divorce. But our child had asthma and was physically weak, and I was constantly worrying about whether I could raise the child on my own if we got divorced. In the end, I couldn't go through with it. During this time, my father-in-law suffered a sudden heart attack. Fortunately, this happened while he was at work, so he was quickly transported to the nearest hospital, and it wasn't fatal. However, the doctor diagnosed that his heart had developed significant arteriosclerosis, a condition that could make breathing difficult at any moment. When George was discharged from the special care unit and, at his request, was to spend the convalescent period at home, I was immediately chosen as the person to take on the role of his caregiver. When Linda expressed to me her expectations, it sounded almost like a command.
Your son is very sickly, so you must be quite used to taking care of sick people. It shouldn't be hard for you to take care of George as well.
She decided to entrust the care of her husband entirely to me and made it clear that she would not be involved at all. She added further,
I hate just the thought of taking care of old people.
These words revealed her negative attitude towards providing care. Moreover, the other women in the family were also pulling away from this situation, using taking care of children and living too far as excuses. David seemed to view this situation as an opportunity for his own gain.
If I can score points now, maybe I'll have a chance to take over the company later. So you go live at my parents' house and take care of Dad.
He commanded me clearly. The mother-in-law also accepted his proposal.
If all you're going to do is sleep here, there's no need to prepare another room.
With that, she set up a small 100 square feet storage room with no sunlight as my new bedroom, put down a mattress in that cramped space, and instructed me to live there. Even if my own feelings were about to be crushed by loneliness, I decided to devote myself to reducing the burden of my sick father-in-law's suffering as much as possible. He appreciated my efforts, and his gratitude became a small comfort for me. I was anxious about leaving my son, who had asthma, at home, so I decided to bring him with me and live together at my in-laws' house. As a result, George found joy in the presence of his grandson, and my son seemed satisfied with the change of environment. Since I started taking care of George, I felt that my relationship with him, with whom I had had little interaction in the past, began to grow. He seemed to feel the same way. To kill time, I chose various magazines and books for George, and as part of his rehabilitation, we both engaged in light stretching and full-body exercises together. Sometimes, we took walks to the nearby park, refreshed ourselves in nature, and shared old stories. During these times, I was able to hear about George's love stories from his younger days, and I realized that these memories were precious to him. Back then, he had a woman he loved, and they had promised to marry each other. However, facing a financial crisis in the family business, he decided to marry another woman in an arranged marriage to save the business, and the woman he loved all of a sudden disappeared.
She has already gone to heaven. But I am looking forward to the day I can meet her again.
I felt that his eyes were looking far off in the distance, as if he was expressing a longing to see her again as soon as possible. As time went on, George's physical strength clearly declined, and he eventually became almost bedridden. After 3 years had passed, he was no longer able to get up on his own. I had become the only warm light for my sick father-in-law in that house. He was still well aware of his surroundings and hadn't lost his passion as a businessman, so he often called his 3 sons and gave them business advice and instructions. However, Linda, who lived under the same roof, hardly ever visited George's room. Even when she did, her face was filled with discomfort.
This room smells like a sick person. I don't like it.
Listening to her words, my father-in-law reflected on his marriage. His marriage hadn't started from love, but he had truly wished to live a happy life together.
I have allowed her to do as she pleases, hoping she would find happiness. But I never imagined it would result in such an indifferent wife.
His sons, too, seemed to visit only for work consultations, paying little attention to their father's health or feelings. Seeing this situation, I had repeatedly suggested to my husband,
why don't you visit your father on weekends? Even if just for a while. Enjoy a heart-to-heart conversation and take care of him.
However, David seemed to have other plans, and his answer was always the same.
Why should I visit a sick person on my precious day off? It's very tiring, so I don't want to go.
I was heartbroken over George's lonely last moments in the hospital room. Despite the reality that David's own father was grappling with heart disease and his life was hanging by a thread, he showed no gratitude or affection as a son. Knowing that my husband was completely ignoring his responsibilities and love for his father in such a situation, I was astonished and my disappointment in my husband deepened. Meanwhile, George communicated his thoughts on his family and the company to his sons through his secretary. They seemed to be so absorbed in seizing power within the company that they showed little interest in the actual running of the business. As a result, the firm was gradually falling into financial distress. As the end approached, George had to be readmitted to the hospital. There, by his own initiative, he continued to issue numerous orders to his secretary and legal advisor. He also called me in and carefully and in detail informed me of possible future family disputes and division of the estate. It was a scheme to double down on the neglect and disrespect he felt before he died, served to him by his wife and sons. Then came George's final day. On his deathbed, the only person who stood by him was me. He left this world with a content smile on his face, whispering the name of a woman he once loved. I quietly joined hands in prayer and whispered, "May you reunite with the woman you truly loved in heaven." Soon after, Linda and his sons arrived, and without shedding a single tear, they immediately began preparing for the funeral. I quietly observed them. Squinting her eyes, Linda turned to me, her words without showing the slightest color of emotion.
"You have performed your duty as a wife in our home for a long time. We appreciate that effort, but now it is over. Let this be an opportunity for you to be free. Now, take the next step and leave this house."
Linda's voice echoed as if my own existence was being erased from this world. I was certainly aware of my divorce from David somewhere in my mind, but I had not had any actual conversation with him. Looking at his face, he seemed unaffected, and he even wore a smile as if he was enjoying the whole thing.
As a matter of fact, I already have a new son. Unlike your child, he's a healthy, strong boy.
So it was true. He had cheated on me and had a relationship with another woman. I had been so caught up in taking care of George that I had pushed that fact to the back of my mind.
"I understand. In that case, I will leave this place with my child. But just so you know, I will make sure to receive a satisfactory amount for alimony, asset division, and child support during the divorce."
As soon as I said that, David tried to argue back, but my mother-in-law interrupted him.
"How presumptuous of you! The blame for not being able to bring a healthy son into this family should actually be directed at you. If anyone should be demanding compensation money, it's us."
Her arrogant attitude only fueled my anger further.
"In that case, shall we put the divorce on hold? That way, your son forever will be considered illegitimate. And when the time comes for him to be the successor of the company, the conflicts arising from this fact will be unavoidable."
Saying this made David and his mother exchange frustrated glances, whispering to each other.
"Anyway, tomorrow, as scheduled, we will be visited by a legal advisor that George had commissioned before his passing. Let's settle this matter once and for all then."
With that, I stepped into my house for the first time in months. As expected, my husband's mistress had already moved in, and evidence of her stay was scattered throughout the room: expensive brand clothes, jewelry, and bags. Putting a price tag on each of these items would surely add a significant amount to the alimony I would demand. Anticipating this, I meticulously took photos of everything for later use. The next day, the legal advisor arrived at the scheduled time at George's house, and as Linda, the three brothers, and I gathered in the living room, he began to explain the details of the will.
Firstly, the deceased had a relationship with another woman before he formally got involved with his current wife, resulting in a son named Eric. The mother realized she was pregnant after they separated, and the deceased himself only found out about this child half a year ago. This will states the intention of legal recognition for Mr. Eric, and specifies that for every month his grandparents raised him on behalf of his deceased mother, until he reached the legal age of majority, they will be paid $1,800, totaling approximately $450,000.
Upon hearing this, the three brothers and Linda were left speechless, their mouths hanging open. They seemed unaware of Eric's existence. If George himself hadn't known how this child is living with the other woman, it's no surprise they hadn't known either. And what shocked them even more was the reality that Eric might eventually be recognized as the legal eldest son. Despite the changing corporate culture and the gradual decline of seniority, many still respect the eldest son inherits the business tradition. If Eric begins to assert his position, Ken's seemingly secure position as the next company president could be jeopardized. Ken was visibly shaken.
How can we entrust our company to him, a man who has suddenly appeared out of nowhere?
He shouted, his expression one of confusion. The lawyer began to explain the situation to him in a calm manner.
About Mr. Eric, he is aware that he is the biological son from his mother's side, and is currently demonstrating his capabilities as a sales manager at another public company. His management skills have been highly praised. The late president had acknowledged his abilities during their several meetings and had strongly recommended him to the executive team, which makes his chances of becoming the next president quite high.
I suddenly remembered a scene I had witnessed at the hospital. A middle-aged gentleman, who shared George's gentle demeanor, had been visiting him in a hospital. It must have been Eric himself, though I hadn't realized it at that time. Suddenly, Linda raised her voice.
So, what happens to the inheritance? Will Eric also get a share?
There was a mix of surprise and dissatisfaction in her voice. The lawyer answered calmly.
In accordance with the law, Mr. Eric does have inheritance rights as a recognized child. Hence, half of the inheritance property will go to you, ma'am, and the other half will be divided among the four brothers.
Upon hearing this answer, Linda showed a relieved expression after a brief moment of silence.
That's fine then. As long as my share is not affected, there's no problem.
However, her words only ignited the already simmering anger of the three brothers.
What did you just say? You disrespectful old woman. We suffer losses while you gain benefits?
Ken was furious and shouted loudly. David couldn't contain his emotions and raised his voice as well.
You've done nothing. You've just been fooling around all the time. The only one who has been taking care of things here is Lisa. You don't deserve a single penny.
And so, the brothers' anger erupted.
How dare you say that? I was the one giving detailed caregiving instructions to Lisa. You guys were the ones always out and about, doing nothing.
Irritated by their exchange, I decided to join the fight.
What? All I heard Linda say was, please take care of things while I'm out. Where is the detailed caregiving instructions in that?
She glared at me with a flushed face, but of course, I glared right back. Then, the lawyer continued. His voice grew deeper, disclosing the vital facts in a quiet but firm tone.
Furthermore, regarding assets that are commonly thought to have been personally owned by the late president, the truth is actually different. This luxurious residence, where the three brothers live, the land it's on, and the numerous expensive cars, are all registered under the company's name. This was a deliberate choice by the late president. When authority shifts to the next executive, these properties might be put up for sale. Mr. Eric has stated that he respects the late president's will and is considering selling these assets after making the current residents leave.
Upon this unexpected announcement, the whole family was enveloped in silence. I was the only one with an uncontrollable smile on my face. If the family had cherished their time with George more, this situation might have been avoided. This is nothing but the result of their own doing. Then, the lawyer began to explain the procedures and conditions for our divorce. The lawyer, unshakable, addressed David in a calm yet stern manner.
Mr. David, having an extramarital affair for many years, resulting in a child, is sufficient grounds for filing for divorce by Mrs. Lisa. Considering this fact, we are demanding a total of $180,000 for alimony, property division, and child support for the minor. Should you choose to refuse this, please be well aware that we are prepared to take legal action.
Facing this unexpected accusation, David was lost for words, standing still as if he were a statue.
To suddenly bring up such a serious matter in this setting.
His voice was trembling, but his excuses were instantly crushed by me. My reaction was sharp, and tone icy.
Now is exactly the time to discuss this. You neglected your fathers in his dying days, ignored your wife, and even brought your mistress, who is proof of your infidelity, into our home, having a child with her. You've trampled on the last wish of your father for this family, and you don't seem the least bit remorseful.
Without looking at David's face, I slammed the divorce papers down in front of him. David's face turned red with anger, and he fell silent, looking down.
If you're the kind of person who can abandon even your own parents, then surely you would leave me behind if I ever fell ill. I can't imagine spending the rest of my life with someone like that.
Goodbye,
David.
I became reflective, my heart heavy with emotion. My husband, with a somber expression, had been shaking his head for a long time, but in the end, he signed the papers. Faced with a major turning point in life, he seemed caught off guard, overwhelmed, and lost all strength to resist in the midst of the turmoil. For me, this was the moment of liberation I had long hoped for. Back when my father-in-law was still alive and I was providing devoted care, he would say to me with gratitude in his heart,
"This is your well-deserved reward,"
and generously deposited $2,000 a month as payment for the caregiving. The total amount quickly reached nearly $70,000. For me, a single mother, this money was a great help in raising my son. My deep appreciation for George was forever etched in my mind. After George passed away, there seemed to be quite a bit of chaos and conflict in his family's house. But in the end, the company executives came together in solidarity to welcome Mr. Eric as the new president. On the other hand, the three brothers who inherited their father's estate had to let go of the house and cars, and they even refused to take in their own mother. After David was abandoned by his mistress and lost financial support, he left, abandoning his child. As a result, he had to take in his own mother and look after the children. I heard that he is now forced to live in a shabby apartment where debt collectors frequently visit because he borrowed money from dangerous lenders to pay me alimony. In this unfortunate situation, I can't help but feel a sense of pity,